Welcome back to Secret Weapons. My name is Mark Johnston. If this is your first time here, this is a YouTube channel where we do gear demos and reviews, as well as studio tips and tricks for leveling up your writing, recording, and production from the perspective of a guitar player working out of a home studio. If that's the kind of thing that could appeal to you, I would love it if you'd hit that subscribe button and stick around for future videos. Today we are taking a look at the Wave Canon Zero by Caroline. Caroline Guitar Company is one of those companies that doesn't get enough love from me on this channel, and I'm fully willing to admit that. I have owned and loved the Kilobyte and Megabyte delays from Caroline for a long time. The Kilobyte in particular is, in my opinion, one of the best examples that a PT2399 chip delay is only as good as the person designing it. And in a world of somewhat lazy implementations, it is one that stood out in a really wonderful way. And I think that's kind of part and parcel for what's so interesting and compelling about Caroline as a company. Their stuff isn't so much designed to be hyper mainstream. It's designed to be pretty specific and to appeal to the kind of people that are going to get it, if you know what I mean. And the Wave Canon is one of those devices, especially when you get into the Havok stuff. You'll hear it at the end. It is going to be a hit for some people and a miss for others. So let's talk about the Wave Canon. This is the, I think, technically third iteration of this device. There is an original Wave Canon and a Mark II version that was kind of the calling card of this company for a long time. And we are here today taking a look at Wave Canon Zero, a pretty market update to the device, while simultaneously what I think Philippe would call a return to form for it. And that's because, at the admission of Caroline Guitar Company, this pulls a lot of kind of tips and tricks and designs from early prototypes of the Wave Canon and features a really interesting set of features, as well as a couple of really good updates. You still have kind of the hallmarks of the Wave Canon. You have your volume and your gain. That gain is just as vicious as it's ever been. You have a tone control that is handy for kind of rolling back the teeth on that overdrive and distortion tone, as well as the chaos that comes from that Havok control. But where you start to get into some updates is, for those of you who have played a Wave Canon before, you know that Havok thing, the way it kind of creates feedback by interacting with your guitar and your pickup, that used to be something relegated only to if you had this thing first in chain. This thing needed to be able to see directly that high impedance output of a guitar pickup in order to kind of create that squealy, chaotic mess. With Wave Canon Zero, you now have a little button on the side of the pedal, and it says first and not first, and that will let you basically do what I'm assuming is like a pickup simulator in this device that allows you to put this thing further back in your signal chain, so you can finally put boost pedals or compressors ahead of this device without losing some of the really esoteric nonsense that has made the Wave Canon so interesting. But beyond just updating the flexibility of this device and its Havok control, you also now have, instead of the single toggle toggle in the middle for kind of like a voicing switch on the OG Mark II. You now have a shape control on one side and a voltage control on the other. And this is where really crafting the version of distortion that you want in this thing comes into play. I will say this right at the outset. If you want just straight up kind of like say it with your whole chest distortion sound, take the shape and the voltage to maximum, gaff tape them in place, you're good to go. Those settings, those two things maxed out, and just kind of crafting things with your tone and your gain predominantly will actually make this an incredibly versatile and braggadocious distortion sound. It's really fun in that context and can sound absolutely vicious and massive, but also touch responsive. As you roll back that shape, however, you will roll off how hard you hit the distortion in the pedal, but you will also roll off some of those teeth, some of that presence in the sound, giving you access to rounder, warmer sounds. And conversely, you have a voltage control, which does exactly what you think it does. As you dial it back, you start to imbue this thing with that starved, battery, ripped Velcro style sound. It is really great, especially when you take it from 10 to like 9 to 8 for just adding some texture and some kind of out of order harmonics, overtones that build into a signal to give it a little bit of tension. But as you roll further down from that, this thing really starts to fall apart in ways that can be very inspiring or very flabby, depending on how you play, your playing dynamics, and the use case you are looking for. And I think one of the most interesting things about this device is the interplay between all of these different components, especially if you turn that Havok on. That Havok reacts really dramatically to your volume and tone pots on your guitar specifically. Again, you'll hear that later, but it also has a really fascinating relationship with your gain and your voltage on the pedal. You can go from straight up screaming feedback to low rumble oscillations that kind of drop down into like starting an 18-wheeler whose engine won't quite turn over. You kind of have to hear it to understand what I'm talking about. The interesting takeaway from this device is it can do some of the most bizarre, spacey, broken, insane, chaotic things possible, or it can be the most rock solid stack of 4x12s behind you distortion pedal with no frills if that's what you want instead. And depending on the day, I kind of oscillate between which one I like more. But with Wave Canon Zero, it's kind of nice to have both options available to me. So let's go to our sound samples. Let's go ahead and plug this into our amplifier. And in honor of Wave Canon Zero being such a raucous distortion, we're gonna go ahead and bypass the Universal Audio aux box today, stick a microphone in front of a nice loud Milkman amplifier, and really let this thing go a little bit crazy. So as always, let's talk through our signal chain and the context we're working in. I am playing my Bunting Melody Queen T into the Wave Canon Zero by Caroline. We are then going directly into the Milkman Beekeeper, which is an 18-watt Bassman style amplifier. So as always, let's start things off by listening to our clean tone. So let's start things off with a pretty straightforward gain and volume at noon. We have our tone at noon and the Havok control at 0, but we're not going to engage that for a while anyways. The reason we have tone up at noon right now is because we have our voltage and our shape meters both maxed out, which is going to give you the kind of snappiest, brightest, most aggressive response. And with this pickup, or with the pickups in this guitar, full volume or full level on that tone can get really, really bright. We will roll that up as we roll our shape back. So as you can hear, this thing is as we said earlier in the video, very much a pedal designed to be a distortion pedal. You can coax other things out of it, but it is at its happiest when it is tearing apart your amplifier. Let's go ahead and roll through that gain control. Like I said, there is a massive amount of gain on tap in this thing. So let's kind of roll it back to something that could be classified as like low medium gain, something that gives us some dynamic range still. So now that we've got that low, medium kind of breakup sound dialed in, let's go ahead and look at the relationship between tone and shape, because they are very much part and parcel together. The kind of way the pedal breaks up and clips is very bright and forward when it's maxed out like it is right now, and it will soften and warm up and round up as we dial it back, which works in great conjunction with that tone control. I have found that, like I said earlier, this thing gets way too bright for this configuration when you have both of these maxed out. So let's look at that relationship. So we're looking at it with that shape control completely minimized right now. Let's go ahead and, as you can see, we've got our tone control back at noon. Let's roll that back and hear how that, let's take it to maximum and then roll that shape up to hear how it kind of like really goes from this warmer, subtler sound to something with a lot more teeth, especially at these lower gain stages. So like I said, a lot more teeth as you increase that shape, which manifests both in its relationship to tone, but as you can also hear in terms of how much it kind of breaks up in the device itself, because that shape is ultimately a product of both sides. I just think that it has a really strong bearing on that tone control. Let's go ahead and roll that tone control all the way down and kind of hear like the minimum of the range with that shape all the way open. So the last thing I want to look at in the kind of shape of the drive itself before we take a brief and very careful look at that Havok control is going to be the voltage control, which is going to do that kind of like starved battery thing, which can offer up a lot of really great texture in this device. The manual itself will say that you don't even necessarily have to bother with this if you don't want. And I do agree with that assessment of things. This drive does these kind of bombastic, loud amp ripping things really effectively, and you could be perfectly happy to get a lot of leg work out of this thing without having to mess with that voltage. But we're going to kind of take a controlled and careful look here. There we go. That's a good, I think what you would call like a healthy distortion sound. Very full-bodied, very lots of teeth, lots of clarity, lots of presence. Let's go ahead and give it some hair. I mean, for context, here's me talking into my little dynamic mic at the same time as playing some of that versus digging in. So you get a lot of volume and consistency depending on your playing as you really start to starve that circuit. And for context, we are at about noon on voltage right now. And below noon is where you clearly start to get some of those kind of broken harmonics, where you're getting kind of like atonal noise in the signal of a more complex chord. So like your fifths are going to be fine, but like things with thirds. Let's go ahead and take that all the way down. So we're now at minimum zero, like as close to zero voltage. So last up in our exploration of the Wave Canon is going to be the Havok control. In previous iterations of the Wave Canon before this Model 0, the Havok control was only accessible by having this thing first in your signal chain. It basically has to be able to see the pickups in your guitar to be able to do this very strange pickup feedback thing that it does. But with the new model, you have a little switch on the side for first and not first in your chain. So those of you like me who like to use something like or the 29 pedals Una front of chain, or the ability to run a boost in front of this, these things are all now possible thanks to this switch on the side, which I'm assuming is some sort of like impedance or pickup simulator in this device, allowing you to kind of bypass what would otherwise be a has to see the pickup relationship. You activate Havok either momentarily by pressing and holding, or latching by just tapping and letting go. The Havok control itself is going to shape the nature of that Havok. That'll make more sense when you hear it. It's a little bit inscrutable, but as you can see, we've also brought our volume down way low, and that's because Havok is loud. And Havok is one of the other things that has a really, really strong and direct relationship with both your voltage control and your gain control. So we'll kind of give those things a listen after we give it an initial spin. So we've got our gain at like a nice mid-gain level. We have our volume super low right now. We will increase it later. And then we have Havok at the kind of like quote-unquote minimum setting for whatever that means. I told you, it's a weird one.